What is up? Brett Duncan here, not a professional photographer, and today we will be looking at the Sigma Art f2.8 24-70 full frame Sony E-mount lens. Yeah, that's a mouthful. And before we even begin, I'm just gonna let you know that this is honestly one of my favorite lenses for the Sony full frame system, but let's talk about some specs. As I said, it's 24-70 millimeters, f2.8 all the way through. The filter diameter is 82 millimeters, and the build quality on this thing is pretty impressive. So it feels nice in the hand. You don't want it to feel too light. It's kind of weird when your lenses are super light. Most of it is metal. It's got the rubber rings that feel nice and smooth. On the side, you have a toggle switch for autofocus and manual focus. You have an autofocus lock button, and you have a lock switch for when you get a little wild with your lens. So it comes in at 4.84 inches, or when fully extended, 6.2 inches, or as I like to call it, showing off. Now, like I said, it feels nice in the hand. That is because it is 1.84 pounds. So yes, it has some girth, it has some nice weight to it, and honestly, it weighs less than the Sony G Master at 24-70 f2.8. So essentially the same lens, smaller. It does house 11 aperture blades, so you get some nice, pretty decent bokeh out of it. And it is weather sealed, so there is a nice rubber gasket between the housing and the lens, so you are protected from some of the elements. And honestly, the best part about this lens, it comes in at around $1,000 to $1,100, depending on where you're at and what time of the year it is and what sketchy back alley you're in to buy it. And yes, I know $1,000 is still a lot of money, but in the world of lenses, that's pretty good. Compare that again to the Sony G Master version of this, and it's honestly about half the price. So cool, yeah, specs are good, build quality's nice, the price is right, but how does it perform? And honestly, pretty good. That is why this thing lives on my camera about 90% of the time. It's just so flexible. You get a decent wide angle at 24, and you can punch in a good bit at 70 millimeters. The fast 2.8 aperture allows some decent nighttime photography, and it punches all the way down to f22. So even in those harsh lighting conditions, you can punch down and get some pretty decent shots. So let's open up Lightroom and take a look at some photos that I've taken with this, and I will share my thoughts on them. All right, first off, let's take a look at how the autofocus performs on a moving subject. So the autofocus on this is pretty good. I've had better lenses that perform better, but honestly, again, for the price, overall, this is a solid performer. So here you can see my fiance showing off her extreme athletic skills, and one of our pups is going to be chasing the whatever got thrown. And you can see it kind of tracks him pretty well. So from the beginning, let's punch in. Pretty decent tracking. That's sharp, but this is before he got going, right? So let's jump out, couple frames in. Still pretty sharp. Now, it's not the sharpest lens ever. Couple frames later. Yeah, and you can just see it's locking onto him. It's focused on him, but it's just a little soft. Now, this is at f5.6, so about as sharp as you're gonna get. You can step up to about f.8 is probably the best, but I mean, pretty decent performance here. Let's look at the last photo. That's pretty solid. Now, it depends obviously on your camera setup. I'm shooting all this on a Sony a7R4. Crap ton of megapixels. These are all in RAW. Don't worry, I've had a vasectomy, so you're safe. Now, we're getting decent autofocus, let's just say that. But in terms of sharpness, let me explain what I was talking about shooting at f2.8 versus 5.6 versus up to 8. Now, you can go all the way up to f22, but unless it's super bright outside, yeah. Okay, so let's take a look at these two pictures taken probably a couple of seconds apart. On the left here, you will see this is at f2.8 completely wide open, and while still a good picture, I mean, honestly, it's perfectly fine picture. As we punch in around the eye, you will see that it gets a little bit soft. So again, not a bad picture, but you can see the hairs kind of get blurry. The eye isn't as sharp as you would like it to be. Now over here on the right, this is at f5.6, and you can tell much more sharp, much cleaner image. It's not like this one's out of focus or anything. The focus is there. It's directly on the eye. It's just a little soft. So let's run another comparison. On the left, we have f5.6, and on the right, we have f8.0. So again, let's punch in, and I will show you the f5.6 again and again. Yep, that's super sharp. And where is she? Over here. I lost her. And f8.0, just a tad bit sharper. I'd say they're both really sharp, honestly, for a $1,000 lens, but f5.6, f8, somewhere within that range is probably where you're going to get the sharpest images. But everyone loves to shoot wide open. At wide open, that's when you get that nice creamy bokeh. You get that separation. So let's take a look at what kind of bokeh we can expect out of this lens. Here we go, another picture of my lovely fiance. She's looking so happy. Ask her down in the comments why she's just so happy in this picture. But let's focus on the bokeh. So if we punch in over here, you will see that it isn't the best. There's some flaring around it. You can see a little bit of straight lines around there due to the 11 aperture blades. Again, a common theme of this for $1,000. f2.8, this is pretty solid. And this guy down here looks honestly better. That's a pretty creamy bokeh. And I don't know what that is. This kind of looks eh. But yeah, I mean, overall decent. I wouldn't say it's the best, but you know, you're not paying a couple of grand for this thing. So acceptable. Another thing we want to look at is how does this perform at its widest focal length? So completely wide at 24 millimeters. Is there any distortion? Now 24 isn't super wide. It's not like a fisheye, but with some lenses, you can see some distortion at this focal range. So this is a picture I just took with some straight lines in the photo just to give us some perspective, and immediately looking at it, around the center, it doesn't look too bad. This chimney is looking kind of curved a bit, but I wouldn't say it's too terrible. Now, let's go ahead and turn on lens corrections, and you can see what the corrections will do to this photo. So when we enable profile corrections, you'll see, yeah, that was a pretty substantial change. So immediately when we enabled them, we can go over here and look at that same chimney, and that is much, much straighter than it was before. So off, you can see just how curved it was. On, and much straighter. So yeah, would I recommend this for real estate photography? No. Am I a real estate photographer? No. Am I even a photographer? My bank account says yes, but no. But I know one major thing in real estate photography is straight lines. So if you're not getting that natively out of this lens, then you should probably go with a different lens. So I've said a lot of good things about this lens, which clearly means I'm some type of Sigma fanboy and they're paying me so much money to do this due to my huge subscriber count. No, none of that is true. I just really like this lens, but it is not perfect. Now, the one major flaw with this lens is that there is no built-in stabilization, which depending on which camera you're running, might make a big deal, it might not. Now, the camera I'm using does have built-in stabilization, so it's not a huge deal that the lens doesn't, but if you're using a camera without built-in stabilization, yeah, you might have some issues when you're punched in all the way to 70 millimeters, especially if you're trying to use this for video. So take a look at the clips here. The first one is with image stabilization turned off in the camera, so zero stabilization at all, and it looks like I'm basically having a panic attack. Now let's turn image stabilization on in the camera and switch over to that. Much better. No need to call 911. We are good. So if you plan on using this for video, just make sure your camera has built-in stabilization or that you're using a gimbal. And if you're taking stills all the way punched into 70, maybe use a tripod. Again, if you have stabilization, that's good. Or just like have a really steady hand. Speaking of video, this should be a pretty good performer. As you saw, it has pretty good autofocus, and I'm going to put it on the camera right now and let you guys hear what it sounds like when it's autofocusing, because I know that's a huge deal for some people. When they're filming things, they don't want to hear the sound of the motors in their lens going back and forth and ruining the audio. So assuming I can get this on, there we go. I'm going to let you hear for yourself what it sounds like when the lens is focusing back and forth. So literally the microphone is right here by my finger, and let's go. So we have it on video mode. Yeah, if you didn't hear anything, that's because it is extremely quiet. And this isn't a linear motor, which makes it even more impressive. Compare that to my Sony 90 millimeter macro lens, which sounds like a 1970s car trying to start, yeah, I'll take that any day of the week. Overall, what do I think about this lens? Well, I mentioned it as one of the first things in the video, probably my #1 most recommended lens. Now, does that mean it's the best lens? Absolutely not. As we saw in my review, it does a lot of things decently, but it doesn't really do one thing super well. So overall, a solid performer. I'd say in terms of quality, I'd give it about a 7.5 out of 10. But when you combine that with the flexibility of the 24 to 70 millimeters, the price at only $1,000, and its versatility being a still shooter and a decent video shooter, yeah, I'd put it up there as if someone came to me with a gun to my head and said,
"What lens should I buy for my Sony full frame camera?"
I'd be like, let's put the gun down and probably go with the Sigma Art 24 to 70 f2.8. So those are my thoughts on the lens. I like it. It sits on my camera for about 90% of the time, and for the price, can't beat it. But that's all I have for you today. I hope this was informative. I hope it was somewhat entertaining. Again, I'm not a professional photographer. These are my thoughts as just some nerd who really likes camera equipment. But I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, drop a like below. If you like camera equipment, videos, and nerdy camera stuff, then feel free to subscribe to my channel. But that's it. Thank you for watching, and I will see y'all next time.